Accenture is partnering up with the Digital Dollar Foundation to launch a series of pilot programs over the next 12 months to explore and inform the future design of a U.S. central bank digital currency or digital dollar. This is unrelated to the Fed, but an independent project. Joining us now to discuss is Accenture Senior Managing Director David Treat and Digital Dollar Foundation founder and former CFTC Chairman Chris Giancarlo. Welcome, Chris and David.
Thanks to be with you again, Christine.
Always a pleasure. So Fed Chair Jerome Powell has said the U.S. Central Bank is exploring the creation of a digital dollar. Tell us about these pilot programs your partnership through the Digital Dollar Project is launching. Give us an example of what it will look like, who will be using it, and how it will work.
Well, maybe I'll set the stage and then ask David to talk to you a little bit about specifics. You know, we launched the Digital Dollar Project in January of 2020, 16 months ago, and our mission really was to advance, to advocate for the advance of U.S. exploration of this new technology in the form of central bank digital currency, or what we call the digital dollar. And in that time, we've put together a terrific advisory board across the political and intellectual spectrum with advocates for financial inclusion and economic privacy, as well as those from central bank backgrounds, commercial bank backgrounds. We put out a white paper at our website, digitaldollarproject.org, last spring. I had the honor to testify in front of Congress 3 times last summer. And pursuant to one of those conversations with the Senate Banking Committee, we put out for public consideration 9 proposed pilot programs that we think are an important way for the U.S. really to take this exploration to the next step. And we've decided over the last few months to actually put our time and our money where our mouth is, to actually put those pilot programs into effect. And with the help of Accenture, we're going to do just that. And that's what we announced today. And I'm going to ask my colleague, David Treat, to talk a little bit about some of those pilots.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. We actually formed our blockchain practice back in 2015 off the back of our very first client being a central bank. We've been working with central banks around the world for since then. We've actually at this point supported the majority of the G20 central banks. And so not only is there a global body of knowledge and experience around the world, the BIS report of the fact that 80% of the world's central banks are on this journey, we're very excited and eager to bring that global knowledge base through a dedicated team that we have. It's run by a guy named John Velasarios on my team, wonderful team that's focused on central banks around the world. But as Chris said, we haven't had the dialogue and the experience from a U.S. context. We're excited to bring that global experience to bear in the U.S. context. And we also have the huge advantage of a phenomenal number of private party exercises already underway on a stablecoin construct that can provide a basis for those pilots. So we've got, as Chris said, we have 9 different pilot use cases that were proposed out of the congressional testimony last summer. Those are our starting point, and they range from financial inclusion use cases all the way through commercial banking and core capital markets.
So David, could you give us some specific examples of how those use cases will look like? You know, who will be using it and how will it work?
Yeah, so there's going to be intentionally a variety of different types of use cases, again, to address the entire spectrum of how a CBDC can be applied. So on the financial inclusion side, we have enormous banking deserts here in the U.S. where there isn't a bank for 200 or 300 miles around, and the whole notion of can the combination of digital wallet infrastructure and digital identity provide an easier access point to those that are unbanked or underbanked right now than the incredibly expensive ways that these people are forced to be able to participate in online commerce in our financial system. And so some of the pilots will focus specifically there. Some will focus on the urban setting, all in different combinations of partners that we'll need across the retail banking, commercial banking, private enterprise perspective, informed by the public sector needs and demands. And so we'll have use cases focused on that area, and then use cases at the other end of the spectrum where there's already work underway as to how a central bank digital currency can underpin the future of core capital markets infrastructure, that direct exchange of a tokenized asset versus tokenized cash, or the cross-border payments infrastructure is another great example, in our remittance infrastructures. So what we'll see is a combination of parties coming together to be able to support the different aspects of each use case, and each being unique and very focused, all contributing either time, resources, money, to be able to get to a point where we can generate insights, and then we're going to share that with the widest possible stakeholder community.
This is a very exciting project. This is a question for David. Nice to see you. So I can imagine some people having some issues with this because they're going to think it's going to be some sort of invasion of privacy, right? Because obviously this is a less private form of currency than is cash. And you know that Americans value privacy a lot. And are there any privacy concerns here? And also, how do you sell it to the public? Because, you know, this idea that, you know, the government somehow has some visibility into how you're spending, there's definitely going to be a lot of Americans who are not going to be comfortable with that.
Well, I think that's the specialness of what we have, the opportunity we have in front of us is the technology is enormously configurable to meet the, what we choose, for our societal values and our, certainly privacy has been long held as a tradition at the heart of our financial system. And so the ability to configure the technology to meet those demands of society, I think is the incredibly interesting work ahead of us. The technology does afford the ability to have both, that ability to have a set of government ordained actors, regulated actors operating the node infrastructure, limited by the Fourth Amendment around access to that data and its use without warrant or just cause and legal due process, and otherwise having no visibility into those transactions as one of the possibilities that the technology affords, where we can have this, and we can adhere to the existing construct where under $10,000, all transactions, in physical cash can be entirely private. You don't need to identify yourself, and above which, can trigger the appropriate financial crime management constructs. So, I think it's an incredibly important area of focus. We're doing a lot of work around the privacy space and the implications. There are, this community will certainly appreciate just the amazing potential that's part of this technology around privacy preserving compute and the ways that we can protect data in these systems to modernize our systems in a way that's comfortable for everyone.
So,
if we share the view that the future of money is digital, whether that be sovereign money or non-sovereign money, then the issue of privacy is so critically important, right? We're watching the rise of a digital yuan, and there's no question that that's going to be part of China's social surveillance and their social credit system to monitor economic transactions. We in the West have a long tradition of economic privacy from government surveillance. It's written into our Fourth Amendment, and in Europe, they have their GDPR protections for individual privacy. And so the debate today is being waged globally between the democracies with long traditions of privacy, economic privacy, social privacy, and the non-democracies. And our whole initiative is geared toward pushing the United States to a leadership role in that debate over the future of money and what values are going to prevail. Are they going to be traditional values of individual privacy that have long been the norm in the West and in democracies? Or are they going to be the values of social credit scores and social surveillance? That really is the core issue, and that's really why we feel it's so important for the United States and the other democracies to assert leadership in this new technology and not allow our non-democratic economic competitors to dominate the value setting, the rules, the protocols, and where the digital future of money is headed.
So, Commissioner Giancarlo, welcome back. Of course, you're I think one more appearance, you become a co-host. So, my question,
or at least I get flyer miles or something like that.
Yeah, I think we have a punch card, and the fifth one you get a coffee. This is so. One question, of course, coming back to it is, how does it actually work? Can I apply for it and say, hey, I want to be part of this program? How do you select the people? And where do they use those digital dollars? And can they use those digital dollars anywhere? If they can't, wouldn't that affect their ability to grow it?
One of the reasons we're so pleased to be working with Accenture is because they're involved in the majority of pilot programs that are taking place around the world with different central banks. And so they've got experience in setting up these programs. And it's going to be an important part of this as to deciding who to work with, what the different programs are. But everything we do, we're going to make publicly known. It'll be on our website, as we've done so far. Our 9 proposed pilot programs are already there. And so we're really looking forward to doing something that's actually relatively difficult for the central bank and for government to do, and that is to work with the private sector, both commercial and non-commercial entities in the private sector. And we're delighted to have David and his team to help guide that process.
Chris, do you have any connection or communication with the Federal Reserve or Jerome Powell while you conduct these pilots?
So it's been our process from day one of the Digital Dollar Project to keep the Federal Reserve and the administration, the previous one and this one, apprised of what we're doing. We've had the pleasure to present to staff members of the Federal Reserve Board, to present to federal bank presidents that are looking at this, and we'll continue that dialogue as we go forward.
So you mentioned Chris, you mentioned the central bank digital currency, China's central bank digital currency. Is this digital dollar going to have any use cases internationally? What is the vision for it internationally?
Absolutely. David, maybe you can talk a little bit about that. It's a very important part of what we're going to do.
Yeah, the U.S. dollar is the world's reserve currency and used globally in our global financial ecosystem. Cross-border payments is one of the key use cases that we are eager to test from the U.S. perspective. It's being tested already in lots of other contexts. If you look up, as a great example, the first instance of central bank to central bank exchange of fiat currencies in the Project Jasper Rubin or Rubin Jasper, depending on which country you're sitting from, between Singapore and Canada, was a great first example. And so there is a active dialogue underway as to how does central bank digital currency work on a cross-border basis. We're at the beginning of those prototypes and first use cases and experiences, and having the U.S. participate directly in that dialogue we see as critically important. As of course being the world's reserve currency, it's going to has to play a role. I think both Chris and I fully share the views that Chairman Powell expressed last week that it's much more important that it be done right rather than be done first. And so getting these pilot programs going now, starting to develop that experience and look at the models by which that will operate is central to what some of the pilots will be about.
Yeah, David.
Emily, there's not a week that goes. Christine, sorry, there's not a week that goes by these days that there's not another conference or a series of papers delivered on the prospects of central bank digital currency. But what's missing is some real data and empirical data analysis coming out of a U.S. context, coming out of a dollar-based context. There's data coming out of Europe. There's data coming out of Canada. There's data coming to Singapore. And, of course, there's stories coming out of China. But what we really don't have is real U.S. testing and data generated from that in order to inform the conversation about a digital dollar. And so that's what we really hope we can contribute is pilot programs and then making all that information publicly available to the Fed, to Congress, to the administration, to academics, to others who are involved in the debate. The debate is in the early days of whether the U.S. actually launches a digital dollar. But what we really need right now to inform that date is real pilots so we can really see some results from that. And that's how we're going to contribute to this public conversation.